Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. We're joined today by Kane Sweeney, who's the new head coach at USC Upstate. He's a young Division I head coach who I'm lucky enough to have as a former player as well. So great to have Kane on here for the first time, and hopefully this isn't the last time we'll have him on. But I wanted to have him on today specifically because there are so many questions among parents and players right now. It is currently August 22nd, 2024 when we're recording this. This recording may only be good for a couple weeks or a couple months, depending on what the NCAA comes out with. But basically, we want to have a conversation today with the Division I head coach about, as updated as possible, what he knows about the new NCAA rules, about the 34-man roster, and all the ins and outs of that, as well as the NCAA's decision to let schools increase their scholarships to as many as 34. There's a lot to break down there, and as much as college coaches kind of still don't know what's going on, parents and players know even less. So, Kane, that's why I brought you on today. And we're just going to do the best we can to sort of update people on what you know as of this point. So, first of all, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast. Feel free to call me Coach or whatever you're comfortable with on this. But, Kane, thanks a lot for me.
No, man, I'm excited to be here, excited to be doing it. Hopefully we get to do another one in the future, too, maybe in the long form.
So, the first thing, I guess, I just want to start with the basics of this. I want to start with the roster size first, because I think that is affecting more people than anything else at this point, because I've started to see, just as a casual fan, guys decommitting from schools because of the roster limitations. But as far as I know, and I've just, I've heard things, I don't know exactly, maybe you've heard more than I've just heard grumblings of. But Kane, can you just kind of update us on, is a 34-man roster, is that going to affect every school? Is it only going to affect some schools? And if it's only going to affect some schools, what do you know at this point about who it's going to affect and who it's not?
I think the 34-man should affect, it's probably going to affect everybody to some capacity. I think the days of the 40-man roster, I think, are going by the wayside. I don't think you're going to see 40-man rosters in the future. The 34-man, to my knowledge, right now is only going to be a spring number, and they're trying to figure out basically a soft cap or a cap for the fall, and then another cap on the roster size once you get to the spring. Right now, we don't really have a cap in the fall, but we have that 40-man cap once we get to the spring. So I think it's going to be mainly P4s that have to deal with that. I think you may see, like a Sun Belt, some of the Sun Belt schools and stuff like that also get to the 34 number. But the biggest thing that we're hearing is basically, it's all about revenue sharing from the top and what you're making, giving back to the players. So I think it's, in terms of the revenue sharing, I think you're only going to see basically there's two different facets here. You can either opt into this process or you can opt out of this process. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see all these big schools that have the money and have the ability to do this, I think will opt into the revenue sharing model. The schools, at smaller sizes, smaller schools, I think you'll see them opt out of the revenue sharing process. And when that happens, then there's other rules that have to be established. So schools like us are basically having to wait for what's happening at the top and trying to see what that will look like from a P4 standpoint, and then try to put together as a league kind of a policy and protocol towards what we're looking at. I think we will still, the maximum number of scholarships you're going to be allowed to have is going to be 34. Not every school will have 34, and that's it. I don't think every school across the country will obviously have 34. I don't think every P4 will have 34 full scholarships. I don't think most schools can afford to do that, even at the highest level. At least at this point. I think maybe in the future you can see something like that. But for schools like us, it's not going to change a whole lot. Our process and what we're doing won't change a whole lot. We may be more handicapped by what we're doing from a roster standpoint and how many guys we can hold on our roster in the fall and in the spring. But right now, there's no set number, to my knowledge, of what that's going to look like.
I want to talk about a couple of things you just brought up. First of all, for people that aren't familiar, the Power 5 has gone down to the Power 4. So when Kane's talking about P4, there's mainly 4 power conferences now that will be in a little bit of a different financial situation than most other schools. As far as opting in and opting out, tell me what you know about that and what exactly that means, if you have any idea what it means. So here's what I've heard. I'll just start with that. I have heard that you're either going to opt into 34 scholarships, which means you're going to go to more than 11.7, whether you have 12, 15, 20, or 34. You're either opting into this higher scholarship situation, or if you're opting out, that means you're going to stay at 11.7. And there are some differences as far as how that's going to affect your roster and all that. Is that accurate? And if not, like, what have you heard differently?
That is accurate, but I think the 11.7 from what I've been hearing is gone. Like there is no more 11.7. It's going to basically be up to the conferences and to the schools, either what the minimum is that you can, regardless of whether you opt in or out. I think that 11.7 is gone. Now, that's not to say that everybody's going to have more than 11.7. Some schools may operate at 9. Some schools may operate at 8. And obviously those are schools that are, in today's day and age, I think we'll struggle to get and recruit good players because you don't have the scholarship dollars to be able to bring in a lot of really good players to get the depth that you need to have success at this level. So, I don't know what that's going to look like. I know there's the two processes of the opting in and opting out. Schools our size will most likely opt out. Schools that are much bigger than us will opt in. I don't know. I know the 11.7 is gone, but it sounds like the 34 is the maximum that you're going to be able to carry, which is also the maximum number of scholarships. You can basically work anywhere from 0 to 34 in terms of the scholarships as an individual institution.
What is going to be the difference between if you opt in and opt out? Where's the difference?
I think that's what we're trying to figure out right now. I mean, I wish I had a better answer than I really don't know. But my best guess is that we will have different roster limitations than what the P4s will have. I think you'll look at the schools that will opt in. The schools that opt in will have the 34 cap. I think there's a chance that they're carrying 38 in the fall, and then they have to get down to 34 by the spring. I think for us, in terms of our roster, we may be at a 35 in the spring, but we may be able to carry as many players as we want in the fall. I don't know if that's going to be a school-by-school thing, a conference-by-conference thing, or if they're going to come out with some set generic number that everybody has to stay within. All that kind of remains to be seen. And I honestly, timeline-wise, I think we'll have some information in September. I don't think we'll actually get an answer until about January, which makes it really hard as a coach to figure out what you need to recruit and what you need to do, because you don't know what next year is even looking like. And we're recruiting for next year right now. We're recruiting for 2 years out right now. So it's very difficult to put a roster together when you're dealing with this type of stuff, which, like you mentioned, that's why you're seeing all the decommitments right now. It's not, I don't think it's the kids that are decommitting from the schools. I think it's the schools feeling forced to make decisions on kids that, I think they're probably hearing a lot of different things at the higher levels and not being able to hear, at the mid-major level, but they probably seem to have a better grasp of it, and that's why some of this stuff is kind of coming out right now.
And that's why I wanted to have you on and talk about this, because 2025 graduates are completely in the dark, and I have I try to help some families on social media. People reach out to me, and I'll just kind of help them to understand the process. But I have a lot of people kind of asking me questions about this right now, and kind of a lot of it is like, hey, my 2025 grad isn't really getting any attention at all. Like, what's going on with that? 2025 grads are trying to figure out what's going on with their recruiting class. And, one thing that I've heard, and I guess that maybe this is not exactly true, but one thing I've heard, I guess, is if you opt out, I mean, I know maybe nobody has any real answer to this, but if you opt out, you're possibly going to be able to have a 40-man roster in the spring. Have you heard that, or do you think everyone's going to have to be down to 34 in the spring?
I think I had a Big South head coaches meeting yesterday, so I got to hear a little bit more about this, but obviously they don't have any answers either, and they're waiting from the answers from the top before that kind of trickles down our way. I think it's going to be league by league at that point. I don't think you'll ever see the 40-man roster again based on what I've heard so far. I think you're more likely to see a 35-man roster at our school, but I think you're going to have the capability of carrying, 45 to 50 guys in the fall if you wanted to. We don't want to operate that way. I'd much rather not carry that many guys, but I think the opportunity is there for some schools, and especially when you're looking at trying to. And some of our schools need the extra players for enrollment, or different things like that too. So they're carrying, an extra 6 or 7 guys throughout the fall, and then making a decision on, who to keep for the spring. I mean, some of that stuff is happening across the country. I don't know what it's going to look like. I think that's the hardest thing to answer because obviously we're right. We're at 40 right now, and we'll find a way to get down to 40 by the spring and do the best we can, and then. The problem is I'm hearing we got to go down to 35 next year. Well, if you look at our current roster, we have 2 guys that are graduating. So that makes it really hard to get down to 34 or 35 next year with only 2 guys graduating. And I know for us personally, we've lost some guys to the transfer portal, but we haven't lost a plethora of guys to the transfer portal. And I think that's something that, unless we're losing guys to the transfer portal next summer, I don't know how to make roster decisions that, are in the best interest of my players. I think that's really hard to do.
So obviously this is affecting the 2025 graduating class a lot because, what I've talked about before on different videos on Twitter and, with people individually is how much the transfer portal is affecting recruiting high school kids. And, I'm sure a lot of schools are in your position where they're going to be really creative with how they get down from 40 guys to 34 next year because they're only graduating a certain number and they already have some certain guys committed. It's, you're 12 months away from kids being on campus and you still don't know all the answers. If you were in a room with a bunch of 2025 grads right now, Kane, what would be the best advice that you could give them as far as how to sort of navigate what's happening right now? Kids that have Division I dreams, kids that on paper feel like they're Division I players, or maybe kids that have gone to camps and schools are kind of saying to them like, hey, we're interested, but we just don't know. Do you have any guidance, any advice whatsoever for families like that of what they could do? It might be a difficult question for you to answer, but that's kind of the audience that we've got today. What do you suggest for these kids?
First off, if you have an opportunity, you want to play Division I baseball and you have an opportunity at a school that you like and you feel good about, you should go ahead and commit to them right now. That's my take on it personally, and my reason for that is if you can secure a scholarship from Division I, then you should go ahead and take that. As long as you're comfortable with the institution and with the coaching staff and all that stuff. Secondly, I think for them it's very important for them to get in front of these coaches. So I think the showcase route is a good route for a lot of these kids, which a couple years ago I would have said, no, showcases are the money makers and all that stuff. Hey, if you really want to go play at that school, I think you should get on that campus in front of those coaches. If you feel like you can play at that school, go do it. I think it forces the coach's hands at that point to be like, you know what, that kid is pretty good. We should do something with him. But trying to get in front of the coaches that you want to play for, or the institutions that you want to play for as often as possible, I think is important. But if you're a guy that hasn't heard from many schools, I think it's important to do a lot of social media, trying to reach out. I get DMs all the time. I try to look at every video that comes across my DMs. Sometimes I'm better at it than others, but if you're consistent with trying to reach out and do things like that, I think that's beneficial. The alternative, to me, I think junior college is going to absolutely blow up with all this stuff going on. I think junior college baseball will be a really good route for a lot of guys. We recruit heavily out of junior college. I know a lot of other mid-majors are going to be doing a lot of junior college stuff. And with the P4s getting down to 34-man rosters, I don't think they will be doing as much junior college stuff. I think they'll be waiting for the portal. So if you're a guy that's interested, if you feel like you're a mid-major Division I player, go try to get your qualifier status for Division I so that you're able to leave after a year at junior college. That's honestly the advice that I would give. Go to junior college for a year, play well, reach out to people. Hey, I put these numbers together, had a good season. I really want to come play for you guys. I think you're going to see a lot of the schools our size do a lot of junior college stuff moving forward, just knowing what the roster situations are going to be.
I think that those changes and the Power Fours, I have to make that adjustment in my mind. The Power Fours,
it's hard.
Power Fours having to go down to 34 and only being able to carry whatever number they're going to have to be able to carry in the fall, because we all know that some of these Power Fours are carrying 60 guys in the fall, to this point. And if they're only able to carry a much smaller number in the fall, that just makes such a trickle-down effect. One last thing I just want to ask you about, Kane, just want to get your take on, when COVID came around, it really affected the amount of high school kids that were going to Division I, because all these guys were getting second and third basically years back, where they're able to play for a fifth and a sixth year because they got extra years of eligibility. And that is finally just ending. I'm not sure if you have anybody on your roster who still has like a COVID sixth year or whatever, but I think it's for the most part ending. But now you're going to have all this other log jam because of the smaller roster sizes, and essentially every Division I program in the country is going to be or something like this, less in the spring than they were in the past. Who knows how many less players in the fall, which is going to create more guys going to junior college, more guys going to Division II, NAIA, which is going to create a trickle down, more guys going to Division III. So I guess my next question is how just to give players, I guess, an optimistic viewpoint, if they're not getting Division I interest right now and they have a junior college or Division II who's interested in them, would you prefer to recruit guys out of junior college, or would you prefer to go in the transfer portal and find a guy who's like an all-conference player out of a Division II? Obviously, you get to see junior college players. You don't get to see Division II players. I think this is a real conversation that kids need to have with themselves, with their parents, with their high school travel coaches. You know, for you, just for your program, just speak for yourself. Would you rather get a transfer from a junior college because you can see him, or would you rather get a guy from a good Division II conference that you're familiar with that has put up numbers and just basically based on numbers and word of mouth from what their coach says, you know, grab a guy from the Division II who's had a lot of success?
Ultimately, we as a program would go the junior college route. That's the way that we've done it in the past. That's what we've been comfortable with. The thing about the D2 for us is like you said, we don't have the opportunity to see them play live. We're doing everything based off video and word of mouth, which makes it much harder for us to make decisions on guys. Now, if you're asking me if I had the option to pick between the two, I want the one that's performed at the D2 level. And I think that it depends on what D2 conference they're in and where they're at, and depends on, same with junior college, depends on what conference they're in and the competition that they're playing. So I think it's really a toss-up when you're looking at it. But if I had the opportunity to pick between either one, if a guy puts up monster numbers at a D2 and, you know, is a conference, you know, player of the year candidate, and you got another conference player of the year candidate at junior college, if you're weighing the options, I'd rather have the D2 guy personally. Now, it's not to say either way. It just depends on where they're coming from. It depends on, you know, if a guy's playing junior college ball down in Florida, it's different than playing junior college ball in you know, the Northeast, or and it just depends on where you're at. So I think that comes into like choosing wisely and where you're going, and knowing the type of competition that you're surrounding yourself against and where you fit in as a player too. But I know for us, we've done a lot of junior college stuff in the past. It's worked. We've obviously been successful doing that. I don't expect that to change much on our end.
Okay, I know that said the last question was the last one, but I'm
you're fine. Keep going.
How has your recruiting at USC Upstate changed for 2025 grads compared to how it was for 23 grads, 22 grads, going back, you know, even 24 graduating class? How is your recruiting different from the 2025 class? You know, what I mean by that, kind of what I want to ask is, are you guys almost have to be in like a holding pattern because you don't know what the roster sizes are going to look like? Are you just, you know, offering guys anyway that you would normally offer and just hoping that you can figure it out? Like, how's recruiting different right now for you than it was a year or two ago, Kane? Because Kane's been the recruiting coordinator at USC Upstate for the past couple years, so he's very heavily involved. This is his first year as the head coach at Upstate. So curious how that's changed for you, Kane.
Yeah, for us with the high school stuff, we went out all summer. We did all the same stuff that we went to every event that we would normally go to, but we were much more selective than we have been in years past. And what I mean by that is we wanted to see guys 3, 4, 5 times before making a decision, knowing that this was coming down the road. If we were still operating at the 40-man roster, then, you know, we probably offer, you know, a dozen guys this summer and hope we get a couple of them. But instead, we probably offered half of that, and we ended up with 3. So it's definitely different. And if you're being honest, then, you know, at Division I, if you want a guy that wants to come in and play right away, if you got a 34, 35-man roster, you need a guy that's physically ready to compete at this level. And junior college guys are more ready to compete at this level than high school guys a lot of times because of the physicality, the stuff they do in the weight room, their preparation. They've been through the college grind for a year or two already. And so for us, that's the route that we're leaning towards. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we don't want to still bring in high school kids that we have the opportunity to develop for 4 years and get the most out of their careers as well. So it's finding that balance of, I'd like to have a couple high school guys, I'd like to have a couple junior college guys, but it's changed a lot because, I mean, when we went out in the past, it was, you see a good player once or twice, maybe 3 times, and you're like, yeah, let's roll. And now you want to see him a 4th and 5th time, and you're looking for different things every time. I mean, you don't want to miss it, knowing that your roster is crunched down. You don't want to miss on a guy. You feel like you can't afford to miss on a guy. So now we're almost analyzing too deep on some guys to make decisions on them, and I'm not a fan of that either. So there's a fine line of getting to know enough about them and getting to know too much about them to a point where you don't let them kind of come in and make their own mark and get a different viewpoint of kind of who they are as human beings and stuff like that too. So I like the way we've done in the past where, we go see a guy 2 or 3 times and then they get on campus, you get a chance to kind of find out who they are as people. And then once they get here, find out who they are as players, find out who they are as human beings, what their work habits are like and all that stuff. And hopefully you're doing a good job of dissecting that in the recruiting process. But when you get to the 4th and 5th times, you start seeing the good, the bad, the ugly, the better, the not goods, the whatevers. And that's what makes it really hard for us because you start going back and forth on this was good, this was bad, this was good, this was bad. And so I think for us, we're still trying to figure out what that's going to look like moving forward. I'd like to get back to what we were doing a couple of years ago, but at the end of the day, knowing when you got a roster crunch, you got tough decisions to make.
One more question. Sorry,
yeah,
man, it's coming up as we're going through. But just thinking about conversations I've had with parents and players recently and the questions they're asking me, especially about like communication with schools. If you see a guy, if you see a guy and like a guy, whether he comes to camp or whether you have seen him out on the on the road recruiting a couple times, if you see a guy and like him, you're going to communicate with him, right? Like especially if you've communicated with him once, if you want to communicate with him, you're going to keep communicating with him and he doesn't need to initiate. So I had a question just a day or two ago from a dad who's like, hey, we went to camp. The coaches liked him. They took him on the tour afterward. Like, should we reach out to him now? And I kind of said, if the coaching staff likes you, they're not going to forget about you. They're going to come after you. Now, they may not. It may be delayed now because they don't know what their roster limit is like. It might be several months before you hear from them, but when they know for sure what the roster is going to look like, if they want you, they're going to come after you. Is that accurate? Is that how you communicate with guys? Do kids need to, once you've seen a guy and like they know that you're aware of them, do they need to initiate communication, or are you guys initiating communication with the kid? And I want to ask that strictly from the standpoint of the family that's sitting out there kind of like wondering, sort of in limbo about what's going on. So best you can, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, we initiate communication with everybody that we're interested in. And that's whether we're sending out, showcase stuff, camp stuff, or just reaching out in the recruiting process. And sometimes we want to get you here to find out, what you look like and, let you play on our field, see things, get to know you. And then, like he said, like we may do a tour and show you around. And if we don't reach back out after that, it means we probably had some mild interest. If I reach out that night after we show you around, like, hey, good performance today, really liked everything I saw, that's serious interest. So I think there's a level of interest there, and you just hit on it. I mean, when guys are at showcases, they get shown around, and then you'll hear from them for a couple of weeks. Like, there's mild interest, and if that interest becomes more significant, the coaches will reach out. If you initiate I think as a player, if you're initiating the conversations, then usually it's not a good sign as a recruit. So
good stuff, man. Just wanted to talk as much as we can, as extensively as possible, about how these rosters at Division I are being impacted, if it's impacting everybody or just a few schools. There's a lot of question marks. So whether I have you back, Kane, in a couple weeks, or another coach, like, again, this video might only be good through the end of August. Maybe you guys will start getting some communication later in the fall, but I at least wanted to update people on what you know right now. So I appreciate your time today. I know you're busy. You get people out of your office. So, man, I appreciate all your time, and hopefully we can have you back here again soon, Kane.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, man. I appreciate it, enjoyed it, and hopefully we get to talk again soon.